Good evening and welcome to an all-new episode of WTFriday. I hope your week has been great and you've been able to stay cool because this week has been horrendous. The heat wave is horrible, and I just saw a little while ago on Facebook that next week is going to be even worse. But my 10-day forecast don't show that, but none of them ever agree on anything anyway. A couple of days I feel like has hit over 100 degrees, like around 105, and that's just too much for me. So, hey, let's bring back winter. Let's make that a thing. But anyway, so tonight I'm bringing y'all the story of how the spirit of a murder victim may have possibly helped investigators solve her murder that took place back in the late 1970s. Stick around.
It's Monday, and that means it's time for a new episode of Mystery, Murder, and Magic. And here's your host, Andrea Lee, and sometimes Alex.
On February 21st, 1977, the body of Teresita Basa was found in her apartment that had been set on fire. She was found nude with a butcher knife embedded in her chest, underneath the mattress from her bed, and that mattress had been set on fire. Firefighters on the scene believed that the fire was set to hide the crime of her murder. Basa was born in 1929 in the Philippines, but in the 1960s she moved to the United States to pursue an education in music. But later she decided to change her major to respiratory therapy. And once she got that degree, she became employed by Edgewater Hospital in Chicago. Her co-workers there say that she was a very quiet, nice person, never having any issues with anyone that she worked with. So as you can imagine, they were shocked when they found out that Teresita, sorry about that y'all, had met such a horrendous demise. The only thing that they did find, the investigators, when they were, searching through Teresita's apartment, was a note that either said, and I'll tell you why it said one or the other, but it mentioned either buying theater tickets from or buying them for AS. I've read reports where they've said, one said one said the other, so I'm just going to tell you what it could have been on either way. So the investigators figured that AS was the initials of somebody, and they wondered if this AS had anything to do with Teresita's murder. Now, if there had been any other evidence, they wouldn't have found it, I'm sure, because it had been destroyed by the flames. Now, in the beginning, the police had a few leads, but none of them went anywhere, and one by one, any suspect they had was dismissed. For a while, the case went cold, but just a few months later, just when all hope seemed to be lost, investigators received help from where they never would have expected to have gotten help. Teresita had a co-worker named Remy Chua. And it just so happened that Remy Chua was also an immigrant from the Philippines. Now, the two ladies hadn't been close friends, and they really only barely knew each other. Well, not long after she died, Remy started having these visions and dreams about Teresita on a regular basis. The first time it happened, it startled her because Remy was in the locker room at work and she saw or she thought she saw Teresita standing there, and just behind Teresita, Remy saw a man's face. Well, it scared her so bad she ran out of the locker room. Well, over time, this started happening more and more frequently, and more times than not, it was happening in her dreams at night. One night while she was sleeping, she started talking to her husband, but he noticed it didn't sound like her voice, and it was almost like she was in this trance-like state. And as she's talking, she tells the husband that her name is Teresita. During this time, she started telling Remy's husband the entire story of what had happened to Teresita the night that she was murdered. Through Remy, Teresita told Remy's husband that she saw this man that was an orderly that worked at the hospital. His name was Alan Showery. And he was, like I said, an orderly, and Teresita had asked him to come over to help fix her television set. Well, he must have been like scoping out the apartment, noticing that she had a lot of pretty things, a lot of nice things, and he concocted an idea that he would come back and rob Teresita. So he tells Teresita that he doesn't have the tools to fix that television set, but he would come back with the correct tools. Well, so he leaves, and it's not long before he comes back again. Well, he knocks on the door, and Teresita lets him in. And as she turns to lock the door, as he's, walking, or she thought he was walking away from her, she has her back turned, locking that door, and he attacks her. And he puts her in this very strong chokehold. Well, while he's still got her in that chokehold, he drags her across the floor until she loses consciousness, and he leaves her there. And then it was at that point that he stabbed her with that butcher's knife and left that buried in her chest. Well, to make it look like it was maybe a sexual assault, that type of thing, and to hide the evidence, what he did was he took off all of Teresita's clothes, put the mattress from her bedroom on top of her, and lit it on fire. Now, so Teresita's telling Remy's husband all of this through Remy, and she begs him to go to the cops. Well, remember how earlier I said there was the initials on that piece of paper that said AS? Well, that would explain the Alan Showery. Well, he didn't know what to think of the whole idea. That is, Remy's husband didn't know what to think of the whole idea of like what was going on and contacting the cops. And the next day, he's talking to Remy, and she doesn't remember any of it. And he's like, yeah, you were telling me that, all that happened to Teresita. Well, then it happens another time, and through Remy, Teresita is telling Mr., I believe the last name was Chua, that this man, Alan Showery, had given his live-in girlfriend the jewelry he had stolen from Teresita. Well, so Teresita, speaking through Remy, of course, asked the husband, why didn't you go to the cops? And, of course, he explained that was, they wouldn't believe me. But this time after it happened, he told his wife all about it again, and they decided that they needed to call, talk to the police. Well, the police were a little skeptical at first, and they thought, why not? We have nothing else to go on. So they went to the apartment that Mr. Showery and his girlfriend lived in and start talking to him. And in the course of things, they talk about Teresita's death and whatnot, and they ask Mr. Showery, could you just come down to the police department for some questions? And he agreed to go with them. Well, another cop stays behind and is talking to the girlfriend and wanted to know, had Mr. Showery given her any jewelry lately. And she said that there was 2 pieces of jewelry that he said was like late Christmas gifts that had just shown up, and they were pretty poor, so she kind of questioned that. But so that cop asked her if she would come down to the police station and bring the jewelry as they go. So she does. In the meantime, Teresita's family members that are living nearby have been called in because there's, somebody would be able to identify that jewelry. Well, when there's a cousin that comes in and she sees a ring on the girlfriend's finger and says, yeah, that was Teresita's. And then she shows her, I believe it was a locket that she had in a little jewelry box, and that was Teresita's too. So then they go in the room where Mr. Showery is, and they tell him all of this, and he immediately confessed. I mean, they had so much against him, how could he not confess? So as he confessed, he told them that basically everything that Teresita had told Remy's husband through Remy, that he had went to their apartment to fix the television, and he didn't have the tools, or so he said, and he left, got the tools, and came back, and that's when he did attack her. So he admitted to all of that. But when the case went to trial, he was found guilty, and he was sentenced to only 14 years in prison. And that's not a lot of time at all for a murder. But back then, that was the minimum sentence for murder. But on top of the murder charge, he also had 4 additional concurrent terms of 4 years each for arson and burglary. But y'all get this, he was released in 1983, which was only 4 years after he went to court and was found guilty. Now, I've looked high and low on the internet, can't find a reason for why, he was let go after only 4 years, but I've not been able to locate that information. Now, if y'all have that information or know anything about it, I would love it if y'all would leave me a comment telling me what y'all know about it, because I'm so curious about this. But the last known location of Alan Showery was back in 2004. He was known to be in New York, and since then it's like he's just disappeared off the map. I mean, he could have passed away or whatever, but that was the last trace of that man. Now, Teresita herself was taken back to the Philippines and buried there, so that she could be back home with her family and whatnot. Now, Teresita's death is not the only mystery that's ever been solved with the help from beyond the grave. And so over the next few weeks, I'm going to be bringing y'all stories of other incidents like this where they've had like some paranormal help solving mysteries. But y'all, I know it was short, but that's all I've got for tonight. It's time for midterm exams, so I've got a lot of studying to do. But anyway, until next time, keep it weird, y'all.